Oh shit, back to uni. How am I gonna get back though? Would this new method of transportation help? Let's see, guys. It worked. On Oli here, and this is my review of Free from the Deep. The sixth story of the fifth season of classic Doctor Who, starring Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor. Free from the Deep is the 42nd episode overall. It's 6 episodes long and is written by Victor Pemberton. Unfortunately, all 6 episodes are missing, and this hasn't happened since the Macro Tour, where all episodes of a story are missing. But fortunately, all episodes have been animated for a DVD release quite recently, and telesnaps and surviving clips actually survive. So the plot of the story is as follows. The TARDIS brings the Doctor, Victoria, and Jamie to the coast of Kent, where the ESCO complex is drawing up natural gas under the North Sea via a huge network of pipes linked to the offshore rigs. But the Doctor is convinced he can hear something in the pipes, a heartbeat, something alive. Others at the complex have heard it too. Add one by one contact with the rigs is being lost. But Chief Robson will have none of it, and work will continue. And so it does, until sentient aggressive seaweed begins attacking the base and taking over the personnel one by one, creating a spearhead from which it will launch its attack and enslave the entire human race. Can the Doctor find a way to stop the weed advancing? Or does the only real chance of success lie with Victoria? And if it does, can a way be found to utilize that without harming one of the Doctor's very best friends? So that's the story. So that's the plot for Fury from the Deep. In my opinion, Fury from the Deep is a fantastic story. It does have some faults, but the many strengths of this story can actually make me overlook these faults, to be honest. So, despite the fact that this story is entirely missing, the production of the story was decent to say the least. The overall setting of the story being in the gas refinery was a good call. It helped with the scary mood that the story had. And judging from the telesnaps, I think there were some bits that were filmed on locations such as the beach and the whole helicopter scene. Yeah, and I thought it was really good. And I think an actual helicopter was used during the scene where Robson kidnapped Victoria and the Doctor and Jamie gave him the chase. And it's a shame the whole helicopter sequence is missing because it would have been a very good sight to see, to be honest. The additional bits, such as having Robson in episode 5 being covered with the seaweed, confronting Jamie and the Doctor, was really good. Was a good call. It was quite scary as well. And I'd actually like that. The music in this episode was very tense and it helped capture the mood. The pacing was adequate despite a little drag in the beginning, but I would say it's more of a slow build up towards the main plot other than it being a drag. Right, but the slow pacing is overcome easily and manages to deliver big. The plot was great in my opinion. The idea of a parasitic sentient seaweed attacking and possessing others with the help of a weed creature was something that was actually come out of a horror movie, and this is actually based on a script that Victor Pemberton actually wrote, not for Doctor Who. I think it was called The Mod or something like that. I think the plot was quite similar in both Fury from the Deep and The Mod. Yeah, I think it's called The Mod, but I'm not really sure of the name, but I think it had something to do with sentient mud attacking people. But yeah, and the whole gas refinery actually helps capture the whole based on the siege thing. And I probably would say that this story is probably one of the best based on the siege stories in Doctor Who ever, and probably one of the best based on the siege stories for Patrick Troughton because most of his stories are based on the sieges. Yeah. And the cliffhangers were scary as well in episode 1 when Victoria came face to face with the weed creature. In episode 3 was when Maggie Harris, who was possessed by the seaweed, and she goes up to Robson, and he was also recently possessed, and they were like, "Do you know what to do?" And then all of a sudden, we see Maggie just walking into the ocean, and that was pretty intense. And And the intent of them all was the episode 5 cliffhanger when the Doctor and Jamie gave Robson the chase to find Victoria, and then they enter a room, and obviously, something bad is going to happen because of that music that was playing, and we see Robson emerge from the foam with seaweed covered all over, and he said in a very creepy voice, "Come in, Doctor. We've been waiting for you." And then the music just intensifies, and then we get to the Doctor Who theme tune playing over the credits. Wow, I mean, that was pretty intense. The script was really good, well thought through, and it gave us some very good moments, such as the iconic scene where Mr. Oak and Mr. Crowe attack Maggie Harris by pretty much breathing on the poor girl. And luckily, that scene actually survives as surviving footage. Thank the Australians for that. And I think there was another scene when Van Loftens was in the lift shaft, and then the weed creature just like brings him down to the foam, and the music that was playing as well, even for the Mr. Oak and the Mr. Crowe scene, that music was intense as well. But this was even more intense because the music was just intensifying rapidly, and for the Van Loften scene, and I thought it was quite good. And the director, Hugh David, I think his direction was really good, and I think he managed to capture the scary bits of the story. If you if you listen to the audio, you can really tell that he's doing his best. You can't really hear him on the audio, but you can tell that there's some aspects in the audio that you can tell is actually quite scary. And even by the telesnaps as well, you can see that he's actually doing some bits that is actually intense and scary and all that. In addition, we see this. The sonic screwdriver the first time ever. Well, not this one specifically. This is the 13th Doctor sonic screwdriver. Yeah, but we see the Doctor's sonic screwdriver make a first appearance when in episode 1, where the Doctor was trying to open one of the boxes, but he couldn't open it, so he used the sonic screwdriver. And it's very good to see the sonic screwdriver for the first time, and Charlton uses it 2 more times in the Dominators and the War Games. And I think the sonic screwdriver is frequently used in the John Pertwee era and the Tom Baker era. And then during the Peter Davison era, in the Visitation, John Nathan Turner decides to scrap the Sonic because I think because the Doctor was using a bit too much, but I didn't think it was that much compared to what we see in New Who, when it's just basically, when the Sonic screwdriver is just basically a magic wand, so to speak. And it's pretty much used every single bloody time, especially in series 11. But it was good to see the Sonic for the first time. Now on to the on-screen / audio aspects of the story. I mean, I think the acting was fantastic from everyone involved. Charlton once again was brilliant, but once again, this isn't his best performance. But you can tell he does his best here. I mean, we definitely get to see the Doctor have a more serious side, but not as serious as probably the Moon Base, but more serious in the way that his friends are in danger and concerned that the health and well-being of his companion Victoria, because she was quite frightened. The Doctor was quite worried. So, aside from dealing with the stress from the weed creature and a bit of Robson, he has to deal with a hysterical Victoria. And as you can see here, you can see she's quite. You can't really see well, but on the DVD cover, you can see that she's quite distressed. That's because she actually wants to leave. But I'll get to Victoria's departure once. I'll get to Victoria's departure later on in this review. And the only bit of fun we had in this story was with the Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria in the beginning, after they land on the beach and they decide to have a foam fight, and that was actually not in the script. And I think Hugh David decided to keep that. And it was a very fun scene, and it was a good way to at least have a bit of fun before the dark and deep parts of the story. Now, Jamie and Victoria, they were alright. Most of the focus is on Victoria because this is her final story, and they had a subsequent amount to do in the story. Well, but seeing as this story is actually focused on Victoria, she does a chunk of the heavy lifting, and she does manage to save the day with her amplified screams, which was used to defeat the weed creature, and it was used to at least help Mr. Oak and Mr. Crowe recover from their being possessed by the weed creature. And Jamie, he doesn't really have much to do in this story, but he does have, other than the major scuffle he had with I think it was Mr. Oak, but Fraser Hines shows how much of a great actor he is during Victoria's departure. Now, on to the side characters. They were all great. We had Robson, the boss of Esco Gas, and he was one of those nightmare bosses. He wouldn't listen to any advice. He would just go in his own way. He only cared about his reputation. And when it was suggested that the gas had to be turned off, Robson was like, I can't have 30 years of reputation damaged because the gas is turned off. It's never happened to me. And he was very stubborn, and it was actually a good way. And he actually ends up getting possessed by the weed creature when a bit of seaweed, he was lying down in his bed, and then seaweed actually falls on his face, and that was another scary scene. And I'm surprised that the Australians actually kept that scene in, but decided to get rid of scenes such as, for instance, when Robson was kidnapping Victoria, and she was like dazed in the helicopter, and the doctor was like trying to like get him to like, was trying to like help him see his ways, and I don't understand why that scene was removed, but they decided to keep this scene in. I mean, I would say this scene was a lot more was scarier than that other scene with Robson and Victoria in the helicopter. We also have Harris. I think he was the advisor, and he was the main foe to Robson. Van Lofton's the Dutch worker who also opposed to Robson, and he ends up getting captured by the weed creature in episode 4, then returns safe and well in episode 6. You have Maggie Harris, who is Harris's wife. She gets possessed by the weed creature as well. And she doesn't really do much after she's possessed. I mean, she disappears and doesn't really appear until the weed creature is defeated and takes in Victoria along with her husband. We also have Megan Jones. I think she's Robson's supervisor, and she was the one who actually gave him the job. And as soon as she sees the danger that the weed creature possesses, she was pretty much on board to like stop it. And I think we had Price as well. I think he was one of the main engineers, and we also had the chief engineer who's not actually given a name. He was there also, and they were okay, even though they didn't really do much. And finally, we have Mr. Oak and Mr. Crowe, the main saboteurs, and obviously they were the ones that attacked Maggie and were pretty much raising hell in the refinery. And of all the characters that were there, I'll have to say that I really liked Robson and Harris compared to the other characters. And then, as I mentioned before, Robson is the boss from hell. When he came into contact with the seaweed, he was acting delusional because he was possessed. He ends up kidnapping Victoria, and as I mentioned before, the Doctor and Jimmy give him the chase. And then when the Doctor actually does find Robson, Robson was still possessed by the weed creature, was trying to get him to at least work with the weed creature to take over the earth, and the Doctor was not having it, to say the least. And we have Harris, who actually took over from Robson when Robson went loopy, and he was actually a better. Even though he was still stressed because Maggie was still missing and Robson was out there somewhere, and he was actually quite worried what to do. But he does manage to do a better job, a better job than Robson, to say the least. And he was actually in charge until the weed creature was defeated. And I also like the hostility between the two characters, Robson and Harris, in addition to Robson and Van Lofton's as well. And Van Lofton's, I actually like his character because there was one point in the story where he actually insulted Robson in Dutch. And I think the Doctor and Jimmy and Victoria overheard, and then the Doctor was like, the Dutch don't like the English very much. Now on to the main villain of this story, the weed creature. We don't know a whole lot about the weed creature other than the weed creature being alien. And I think that's what made the weed creature even scary, because we really don't know what this weed creature is, and the whole mystery of it actually helped the story, I would say, and we made the creature intense. And we don't even see what it fully looks like in the telesnaps. But we do actually see a little bit of the weed creature, but in the telesnaps, but there's a surviving sequence in episode 6. Like we see a bit of the weed creature, but in the animation you actually see the weed creature's body, and it does have, I wouldn't say it has a face, but it has a body to say the least, and it looked horrifying. So, speaking of the animation, which just recently came out, not as of the making of this video, I thought it was really good. I mean, it recently came in the post for me just a few days ago, and it was made by Big Finish Creative, formerly known as Planet 55, and the Planet 55 animated missing stories such as The Reign of Terror, The Moon Base, and The 10th Planet. And it was a good thing that they came back, and the fact that they're doing it in color was quite good. And even though there was some glitches that were there, such as Robson, I think he doesn't really have that much. The model of Robson doesn't really have that many facial expressions, and pretty much all of them were the same. And even when he was amused around the end of episode 6, when the doctor said a joke, he still looked a bit angry, and the animation actually changed a lot of aspects that were in the telesnaps and that didn't really sit well with me, to be honest, because yeah, I liked it. The animation was good, but the fact that they changed some bits was a bit disappointing, such as the episode 1 cliffhanger where Victoria met the reed creature in the vents, but in the animation, Victoria actually met the reed creature in the pit that was there. And in episode 3, when the Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria were in the Harris's quarters, and then Jamie was confronted by the seaweed in the kitchen, and the Doctor and Victoria actually had to rescue him using the curtains in the telesnaps and the recon. And in the animation, the Doctor just opens the top window and just pretty much pulls him out. That didn't really, and I was actually looking forward to seeing that scene. I wanted to see how they would have done it, but nah. No, but to be honest, I'd say the animation is really good. I do hope that Big Finish Creative do animate more missing episodes, and maybe some Big Finish episodes somewhere down the line. Now, on to the story's biggest factor and the biggest elephant in the room. We say goodbye to Victoria Waterfield. She decides to stay behind while Harris and Maggie decide to look after her, reason being because Victoria had reached the end of her tether and was tired of the constant enemies that she had to face the Doctor. And to be honest, I don't really blame her, because if the Doctor was real and I had the chance to come across the Doctor and I was offered an opportunity, I'd actually turn it down, because that's not really my thing. I'm just the sort of person who just stays at home, stays safe at home, but not really adventurous. Even though I am a bit adventurous, but not to the extent of going to other planets and fighting bad guys such as Daleks and whatnot. So we will leave that to the Doctor, to be honest. But personally, I don't think Victoria actually really fully got over her father's death. Even though she looked happy in other stories, I'm pretty sure that her father was still lingering in the back of her mind. Even the Doctor's speech in Tomb of the Cybermen helping Victoria to move on, but yeah. But I still think Victoria never fully got over, because she's still quite young and she really looked up to her father, and I think she never fully got over that, and I think that's what pretty much caused her to get scared, and she didn't really have much of a choice to join the TARDIS team and all the way back in the Eve of the Daleks, because obviously she had nowhere to go, so she had to travel with the Doctor and Jamie, and I liked how her Victoria's exit was implied earlier on in the story, in as early as episode 3, as compared to the other episodes, compared to other companion departures, where they would decide to at least leave at the very last minute of the last episode. They're saying to the Doctor, I just want to leave, I just want to stay behind, and then the Doctor just says his farewell and just depart. I mean, compared to this story, Victoria was dropping hints to the Doctor and Jamie that she doesn't want to travel anymore, saying she's just tired, that she just wants, why can't we ever find peace and happiness? And then she does fully get into it with Jamie, and she's telling him that she doesn't want to travel with them anymore, and she's just tired. But obviously Jamie being Jamie, he just wanted his sleep. And then she told the Doctor, who was actually very understanding of the situation, and then at the end, the Doctor was like to Victoria, it's up to you. If you want to come with us, that's fine. If you want to stay, that's fine. The Harrises can look after you. And obviously, at the end of that sequence, you can see Victoria, she's very distressed. She's very tired from facing the weed creature. And you can see she's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Maybe she was she doesn't want to leave the Doctor and Jamie, but at the same time, she has to think about herself as well. I mean, if she does stay with him, if she does stay with the Jamie and the Doctor, then she'll just get scared even more. And I would say it's a good thing Victoria decided to leave here as opposed to traveling with the Doctors. If you look at certain circumstances about how Jamie left at the end of season 6, yeah, you can see why. And in the end, it was very heartbreaking because Victoria actually does decide to stay, and she does have a very poignant scene with Jamie when Jamie was like, "Please stay," and then the Doctor says, and Victoria told the Doctor, "It's up to me. I want to stay here," and then they say goodbye on the beach, and then when the Doctor and Jamie get back to the TARDIS, Jamie was obviously distraught, and I really felt for Jamie because he really cared for Victoria, and I think he did fancy her in a way, and I think she fancied him as well. I mean, you can obviously see telling some stories that they really cared about each other, maybe in that way. And then Jamie was like, "Doctor, we can't just leave her," and the Doctor was like, "It's her decision to stay. We can't really force her to do anything. It's her choice. It's her life. I've just let her be. We can't influence her in some way, one way or another." And the Doctor actually does reassure Jamie that I was quite fond of Victoria too. I mean, it was quite sad, and I would say that this is Deborah Watling's best performance as Victoria in this story. And it's really sad because I would say that Victoria's departure is probably the best companion departure since Ian and Barbara's departure all the way back in season 2's The Chase. So now on to the thoughts I have of the story. And they're fairly minimal, to be honest. I mean, I would say it was slow at the start, but the pacing remains consistent throughout, and we don't really find out what really happens to Oak, but it was obviously implied that he recovered with his colleague, Mr. Crowe, when Victoria screamed and after the weed creature was defeated. And obviously I felt there were times that Victoria was a bit too jittery at times, and I understand that she was frightened, but I'll give it up. And it was a bit annoying, but I'll overlook that because it's her final story, and obviously she was a bit frightened. I mean, if she didn't leave in this story, I would have found it irritating, to be honest. And I thought it would have been better if at least one or two characters would have died, considering how scary and tense this story was. I mean, it was quite surprising how none of the human characters actually died. I mean, it would have been somewhat better if maybe, let's say, Maggie would have died. That would have probably even been more intense. But to be honest, to conclude this review, The Fury from the Deep is one of the most intense stories of Doctor Who ever, and I'm really happy that we have this story animated so we can see how great this story is, and obviously it's a great opportunity for those who don't really watch loose canon to experience the story. And yeah, and it's a huge shame this story is missing, but hopefully one day down the line it actually does come back to the BBC archives. Right, and I'll give The Fury from the Deep a 9 out of 10 and the animation an 8 out of 10. And so my next review will be The Wheel in Space, the season 5 finale, which sees the return of the Cyberman and the debut of one of my favorite companions in Classic Who. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching this review. Please let me know your thoughts of Fury from the Deep, what you thought of this review, and what you thought of the animation if you have it. And so please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Until then, see you next time.